Marcus Chen had always been different from other humans. While most of his species feared the giant creatures that roamed the outer rim planets, he understood them. His weathered hands bore countless scars from decades of working with beasts that could crush a man without thinking twice. The other colonists on Kepler 442b called him crazy, but they also called him when their livestock went missing, or when something dangerous wandered too close to their settlements. The morning started like any other on the frontier planet. The twin suns cast long shadows across the rocky terrain as Marcus loaded his hover truck with tranquilizer equipment and tracking gear. The distress call had come from the mining operation on the far side of the continent. Something had been stealing their food supplies and terrorizing the workers. The description was vague, but Marcus had heard whispers of strange roars echoing through the mountain caves at night. As he drove through the desolate landscape, Marcus reflected on how humans had adapted to life among the stars. Other species in the galactic community viewed humanity as reckless and unpredictable. The Zephyrians considered them too emotional. The crystalline collective found their behavior illogical. But Marcus knew better. Humans possessed something unique that other species lacked, the ability to form bonds with creatures that logic said should be impossible to tame. The mining camp was a collection of prefabricated structures, huddled against the base of a massive mountain range. The foreman, a nervous man named Rodriguez, met Marcus at the gate with obvious relief written across his face. The workers had been on edge for weeks, jumping at every shadow and strange sound. "Thank God you're here, Chen," Rodriguez said, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Whatever's out there, it's getting bolder. Last night it actually came right up to the perimeter fence. Jenkins swears he saw something the size of a shuttle moving in the darkness." Marcus nodded, his experienced eyes already scanning the rocky outcroppings above the camp. Claw marks on the metal structures told a story of desperation rather than aggression. Whatever had been visiting wasn't hunting the humans. It was searching for something specific. "Show me where you've been storing the food supplies," Marcus requested. Shouldering his equipment pack, the storage facility had been partially destroyed. Metal doors hung twisted from their hinges and scattered containers littered the ground. But what caught Marcus's attention weren't the obvious signs of forced entry. It was the careful way the creature had sorted through the supplies, taking only specific items, high-protein rations, calcium supplements, and anything containing trace minerals. "It's not random feeding," Marcus murmured to himself, kneeling to examine strange footprints in the dust. The prints were unlike anything in his extensive database of planetary fauna. Four-toed with prominent claw marks, but the gait pattern suggested intelligence rather than simple animal instinct. Rodriguez followed him nervously as Marcus traced the trail leading away from the camp, toward a series of caves hidden in the mountain face. "You're not seriously thinking of following that thing into its lair, are you?" Marcus checked his tranquilizer rifle and adjusted the settings on his portable scanner. "That's exactly what I'm thinking. Whatever's out there isn't acting like a typical predator, it's behaving like a parent." The cave entrance was larger than Marcus had expected, easily big enough for a small spacecraft to pass through. Ancient mineral deposits created natural formations that reflected his flashlight beam in brilliant colors. The air smelled of sulfur and something else, something organic and alive. As they ventured deeper into the cave system, Marcus's scanner began detecting elevated temperature readings ahead. The readings were inconsistent with the cool cave environment, suggesting an internal heat source. His pulse quickened as he recognized the pattern from his studies of extinct Earth creatures. Then the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, illuminated by natural phosphorescent minerals embedded in the walls. But it wasn't the natural beauty that took Marcus's breath away. It was what lay in the center of the chamber. A massive creature, easily 30 meters from nose to tail, lay curled protectively around what appeared to be a nest. Even in the dim light, Marcus could see the distinctive features that had become legend throughout human space. Scales that shimmered like precious metals, powerful wings folded against an elongated body, and a serpentine neck ending in a head filled with intelligence far beyond any simple animal. "Impossible," Rodriguez whispered, his voice barely audible in the vast space. "Dragons are extinct. They died out millions of years ago on Earth." But Marcus wasn't looking at the adult creature. His attention was focused on the nest and the small movements he could detect within it. The scan readings confirmed what his instincts had already told him. The large dragon wasn't alone. The adult's massive head turned toward them, and Marcus found himself staring into eyes that held an intelligence that made his skin crawl with recognition. This wasn't just an animal protecting its territory. This was a sentient being capable of complex thought and emotion, and it was desperate. Marcus slowly lowered his weapon, a decision that made Rodriguez grab his arm in panic. "What are you doing? That thing could roast us alive." "Look at her carefully," Marcus said softly, never taking his eyes off the dragon. "She's malnourished, exhausted. She's been flying long distances to find food, probably for weeks. And look at her positioning. She's protecting something incredibly precious." As if responding to his words, small sounds emerged from the nest, tiny chirps and squeaks that could only mean one thing. The adult dragon wasn't just protecting eggs. She was protecting newly hatched babies that required constant care and feeding. Marcus made a decision that would change the course of human-dragon relations forever. Instead of raising his weapon, he slowly reached into his pack and pulled out several high-protein ration bars. He placed them on the ground and backed away, keeping his movement slow and non-threatening. The dragon watched him carefully, her massive head tilting as she processed this unexpected behavior from a human. After several tense minutes, she cautiously stretched her neck forward and investigated the offered food. The grateful way she consumed the rations told Marcus everything he needed to know about her desperation. "Rodriguez," Marcus said quietly, "contact the camp and have them prepare every high-protein ration they can spare. We're not dealing with a monster here. We're dealing with a mother trying to keep her babies alive, and we're going to help her do it." The following days transformed Marcus's understanding of everything he thought he knew about interspecies communication. The dragon, whom he had begun thinking of as Sarah based on the musical quality of her vocalizations, had initially been wary of his daily visits to the cave. But hunger and maternal desperation had gradually overcome her natural caution toward humans. Marcus established a routine that respected both Sarah's protective instincts and his own safety. Each morning he would arrive at the cave entrance with carefully prepared meals, a combination of protein-rich rations, mineral supplements, and fresh water. He would place the supplies just inside the entrance and retreat to a safe distance, allowing Sarah to collect them without feeling threatened. The breakthrough came on the 5th day when Marcus noticed that Sarah had begun timing her feeding to coincide with his visits. She would wait near the entrance, watching him with those impossibly intelligent amber eyes as he arranged the supplies. More significantly, she had started making soft rumbling sounds that seemed directed at him rather than as warnings. Rodriguez had initially thought Marcus had lost his mind, but even the skeptical foreman couldn't deny the results. The attacks on the mining camp had completely stopped. More importantly, other dangerous creatures in the area seemed to be avoiding the region entirely. Having a dragon in residence apparently provided better security than any technological defense system. The company executives are asking questions. Rodriguez warned Marcus during one of their evening briefings. They want to know why we're using so many supplies to feed something that was supposedly terrorizing the workers. Marcus looked up from his detailed behavioral notes. "Tell them we're conducting the most important xenobiological study in human history. What we're learning here could revolutionize how our species interacts with non-human intelligence throughout the galaxy." The truth was even more remarkable than Marcus had initially realized. Through careful observation and testing, he had determined that Sarah understood not just basic human gestures and vocal patterns, but was actually attempting to communicate complex concepts. She had begun arranging rocks and mineral fragments in specific patterns after each feeding, patterns that Marcus was slowly beginning to recognize as intentional messages. The real revelation came when Marcus finally got his first clear look at the baby dragons. There were 3 of them, each about the size of a large dog but with the unmistakable features of their magnificent mother. Their scales hadn't yet developed the metallic sheen of maturity, instead showing a softer, opalescent quality that shifted colors as they moved. What struck Marcus most forcefully was their behavior toward him. Unlike Earth animals, which typically showed fear or aggression toward humans, the baby dragons displayed what could only be described as curiosity. When he approached the nest area with Sarah's permission, indicated by a specific positioning of her massive head, the babies would crawl closer to observe him with bright, inquisitive eyes. The smallest of the three, a female with particularly vibrant blue-green scaling, had developed what Marcus could only describe as a preference for his presence. She would chirp excitedly when he arrived and had even begun attempting to mimic some of his simple hand gestures. "This changes everything," Marcus recorded in his daily log. "These creatures aren't just intelligent. They're exhibiting social behaviors that suggest they can form emotional attachments across species barriers. The implications for human expansion into previously unexplored regions of the galaxy are staggering." Marcus's research was interrupted by an unexpected development. His weekly supply run to the nearest trading post brought news that sent chills through his entire body. A Galactic Coalition survey team was en route to Kepler 442b to investigate reports of significant xenobiological discoveries that had been leaked through official mining company channels. The Coalition's approach to newly discovered intelligent species was bureaucratic at best and often resulted in the creatures being relocated to research facilities or designated preservation zones. Neither option would allow for the kind of gradual, respectful contact that Marcus had been building with Sarah and her family. More troubling were the rumors about the survey team's composition. In addition to the standard xenobiological specialists, the team reportedly included representatives from the Harvester Corps, an organization known for their belief that dangerous alien species should be eliminated rather than studied. Marcus faced an impossible choice. He could report his discoveries through official channels and risk having Sarah and her babies taken away for study, possibly never to be reunited. Or he could attempt to hide them, knowing that such deception would eventually be discovered and would likely result in even harsher treatment for the dragons. But as he watched the baby dragons playing together, under their mother's watchful eye, Marcus realized there was a third option, one that no human had ever attempted before. That evening, he sat closer to Sarah than ever before, speaking to her in the calm, steady voice he had always used with difficult animals. But this time he wasn't talking to an animal. He was addressing an intelligent being who deserved to know the truth about what was coming. "Sarah," he said softly, using the name he had given her and which she had begun to recognize. "We have a problem. Other humans are coming. Humans who might not understand what you are. Humans who might want to separate you from your babies." Sarah's massive head tilted, and she made a sound Marcus had never heard before, a complex vocalization that seemed to contain multiple tones and harmonics. To his amazement, she then began moving toward one of her rock arrangements, this one more elaborate than any he had seen before. As Marcus studied the pattern, his breath caught in his throat. The arrangement was clearly representational. A larger rock surrounded by three smaller ones, with additional stones forming what looked like barriers around the family group. Sarah had understood his warning and was asking him about solutions. Marcus spent the next hour explaining his plan, using simple diagrams drawn in the cave's dusty floor and careful hand gestures. It was ambitious beyond anything that had been attempted in human-alien relations. It was dangerous for everyone involved, and it just might be the only way to prove that humans could be trusted as partners, rather than conquerors in the vast community of galactic intelligence. When he finished explaining, Sarah studied him for a long time with those ancient wise eyes. Then she did something that would haunt Marcus's dreams for the rest of his life. She slowly, deliberately, extended one massive claw and gently touched his outstretched hand. The decision was made. Tomorrow they would attempt the unthinkable. The Galactic Coalition survey team arrived 3 days ahead of schedule, their sleek research vessel creating a thunderous sonic boom as it descended toward the mining camp. Marcus watched from his observation post in the hills, his heart pounding as he counted the personnel disembarking from the craft. 12 team members, including 2 individuals in the distinctive black uniforms of the Harvester Corps. Commander Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus despite the shared surname, was a by-the-book coalition officer with a reputation for efficient xenobiological classifications. Her preliminary reports would determine whether Sarah and her babies would be classified as intelligent life worthy of protection or dangerous predators requiring elimination. Marcus had spent the previous 2 days implementing his desperate plan, working with Sarah's remarkable intelligence and cooperation. They had prepared for what would either be the greatest breakthrough in human-alien relations or a disaster that would doom the dragon family. The key to the plan lay in humanity's unique gift among the galactic species, the ability to form emotional bonds with creatures that logic suggested should be impossible to tame. While the Zephyrians approached alien contact through mathematical formulas, and the crystalline collective used complex technological interfaces, humans had always relied on something far simpler and more powerful: trust. Marcus had convinced Sarah to allow him to bring the baby dragons to a carefully prepared meeting ground, a natural amphitheater in the mountains where the encounter could be controlled and recorded. But the truly revolutionary aspect of his plan involved something no human had ever attempted: allowing an alien intelligence to demonstrate its capabilities on its own terms, rather than through human-designed tests. Rodriguez had initially refused to participate, but Marcus's passionate arguments had finally worn down the foreman's resistance. "These aren't just animals, Rodriguez. They're people. Different from us, but people nonetheless. And if we treat them like specimens instead of individuals, we'll have lost something crucial about what makes us human." The meeting was scheduled for midday, when the twin suns would provide optimal lighting for the Coalition's recording equipment. Marcus arrived at the amphitheater early, his stomach churning with nervousness and anticipation. Sarah had promised to bring her babies, but trusting an alien intelligence, no matter how remarkable, with such a crucial plan still felt like an act of faith beyond anything in his experience. Commander Chen's team set up their equipment with military precision, creating a barrier of sensors and recording devices that could capture every detail of the encounter. The two Harvester Corps representatives, Agents Morrison and Valdez, positioned themselves with weapons ready, clearly expecting to deal with a dangerous predator rather than participate in a diplomatic meeting. "Chen," Marcus said as the commander finished her equipment checks, "I need you to understand that what you're about to see is unprecedented. These creatures aren't just intelligent, they're capable of complex communication and emotional reasoning that rivals any species in the Coalition." Commander Chen looked skeptical. "Marcus, I've read your preliminary reports, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The Coalition has strict protocols for classifying new species, and those protocols exist for good reasons. Too many survey teams have been lost to creatures that appeared friendly until they weren't." The distant sound of wings cutting through air silenced all conversation. Sarah appeared over the mountain ridge, her massive form casting shadows across the amphitheater as she descended with graceful precision. The baby dragons rode on her back, their smaller forms barely visible against their mother's metallic scales. Agent Morrison immediately raised his weapon, but Marcus stepped between the agent and the approaching dragons. "Stand down. Any aggressive action will ruin everything we've worked toward." Sarah landed at the far end of the amphitheater, her movements deliberate and careful. She lowered her great head to allow her babies to dismount, then positioned herself protectively behind them while facing the human group. The message was clear. She was willing to risk her own safety to allow her children to interact with the strange, bipedal creatures who had shown them kindness. What happened next would be talked about in xenobiological circles for generations to come. The smallest baby dragon, the blue-green female Marcus had begun thinking of as Melody, approached the human group with obvious curiosity rather than fear. She stopped just outside the equipment perimeter and began making soft, musical sounds that seemed directed at Marcus specifically. Commander Chen's jaw dropped as Marcus responded with similar vocalizations, clearly engaging in some form of communication with the young dragon. "Are you actually talking to it?" she whispered. "Not talking," Marcus replied softly. "Singing. It's how they express complex emotions and intentions. Melody is telling everyone that humans can be trusted because we helped when her mother was hungry. But the real demonstration was yet to come." At some invisible signal from Sarah, all three baby dragons began moving in formation around the amphitheater, their movements coordinated in a way that could only indicate high-level intelligence and social organization. They gathered specific rocks and mineral fragments, creating an elaborate pattern that grew more complex with each passing minute. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Coalition's chief xenobiologist, began making rapid notes as she recognized the implications of what she was observing. This level of cooperative behavior and symbolic representation indicates abstract thinking capabilities that meet every Coalition, standard for sapient intelligence. Classification. The pattern the baby dragons created was a three-dimensional map of the local star system, complete with orbital mechanics represented by carefully placed stones of different sizes and compositions. At the center of their creation, they placed a special crystal that Sarah had apparently given them, a crystal that Marcus realized must have come from their original home world. Agent Valdez lowered his weapon, his expression shifting from suspicion to wonder. They're not just intelligent. They're trying to tell us where they come from. Sarah herself contributed the final element to the demonstration. She approached the equipment barrier slowly, her massive presence causing several team members to step back instinctively. But instead of showing aggression, she began making complex vocalizations while gesturing with her claws at the star map her children had created. Marcus found himself serving as translator, though he understood only fragments of Sarah's communication. She's saying something about a long journey, about finding this place safe for her babies. I think she's asking for permission to stay. Commander Chen made a decision that would reshape human foreign policy throughout the galaxy. Instead of following standard first contact protocols, she removed her helmet and approached Sarah directly, stopping just outside the dragon's reach and speaking in clear, respectful tones. I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Galactic Coalition. On behalf of humanity and our allies, I welcome you to our space. We would be honored to call you our neighbors. Sarah's response was unmistakable. She lowered her great head in what could only be interpreted as a formal bow, while her babies chirped excitedly and began rearranging their star map to include markers that clearly represented the establishment of permanent residence. The impossible had been achieved. First contact with a new intelligent species had been successfully accomplished, not through force or bureaucratic procedure, but through the uniquely human ability to recognize and nurture the potential for friendship across the vast differences between species. The weeks following first contact transformed the remote mining outpost into the most important diplomatic site in human space. The Coalition's initial survey team had been reinforced by specialists from across the galaxy, all eager to study the unprecedented peaceful integration between humans and dragons that was developing on Kepler 44b. Marcus found himself thrust into a role he had never imagined, humanity's first official dragon cultural liaison. The title felt ridiculous to someone who had spent his career wrangling dangerous beasts, but he couldn't deny the importance of the work. Every day brought new discoveries about dragon intelligence, social structures, and technological capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about non-human civilization. Sarah had proven to be far more than just an intelligent individual. She was, according to her increasingly sophisticated communications with the research team, a scholar and explorer from a highly advanced dragon civilization located in a distant star cluster. Her journey to human space had been deliberate, a research expedition to study the species that other galactic races described as unpredictably, emotional and irrationally cooperative. The baby dragons, meanwhile, had become the unofficial mascots of the expanding research facility. Melody had appointed herself as the primary human-dragon cultural bridge, spending hours each day working with Marcus and the linguistic specialists to develop a comprehensive communication system. Her siblings, Storm and Ember, had shown particular interest in human technology and artistic expression, respectively. Dr. Tanaka's research had revealed that dragon intelligence operated on multiple levels simultaneously. They possessed not only logical reasoning capabilities that rivaled the most advanced coalition species, but also intuitive and emotional intelligence that allowed them to understand complex social dynamics and motivations. This combination made them uniquely suited to appreciate the human approach to interspecies relations. It's remarkable, Dr. Tanaka explained to Marcus during one of their evening briefings. Most galactic species develop intelligence in specialized directions. The Zephyrians excel at mathematical reasoning but struggle with emotional concepts. The crystalline collective can process vast amounts of data, but have difficulty with creative problem-solving. Dragons seem to have evolved a balanced intelligence that incorporates all these capabilities. The true test of the growing human-dragon partnership came when Sarah made an announcement that stunned the research team. Through her increasingly sophisticated communication with Marcus and the translators, she revealed that she had been in contact with her home civilization throughout her stay on Kepler 442b. Her reports about humanity had generated enormous interest among dragon scholars, who had apparently been observing human expansion into the galaxy with growing curiosity. "She's been what?" Commander Chen asked in disbelief when Marcus delivered this news. "Reporting back to her people," Marcus confirmed. "Dragons have some form of long-range telepathic communication that we're only beginning to understand. Sarah has been describing our behavior, our treatment of her and her babies, our research methods, everything. And apparently her people are impressed." The implications were staggering. Humanity had unknowingly been under observation by an advanced civilization for months, possibly years. Everything they had done during first contact had been evaluated by dragon scholars, who were now forming their first impressions of human culture and intentions. The news became even more remarkable when Sarah announced that a dragon diplomatic mission was en route to Kepler 442b. 3 adult dragons, including a senior scholar equivalent to a coalition ambassador, would arrive within the month to begin formal negotiations for a human-dragon alliance. Agent Morrison, who had become one of Sarah's most enthusiastic supporters despite his initial suspicions, raised the obvious concern. What if they don't like what they see when they arrive? What if Sarah's reports were positive, but the actual diplomatic team finds us lacking? Marcus had been wondering the same thing, but his daily interactions with Sarah and her babies had given him confidence in humanity's unique approach to interspecies relations. "I think they're coming because they've already seen something they like. Dragons value emotional intelligence and the ability to form genuine connections. Those are humanity's greatest strengths." The preparation for the diplomatic mission's arrival became a planet-wide effort. The mining operation was temporarily suspended, as the facility was expanded to accommodate both the visiting dragons and the growing number of coalition specialists. More importantly, Marcus worked with Sarah to develop protocols that would demonstrate humanity's best qualities, while respecting dragon customs and preferences. The baby dragons played a crucial role in these preparations. Their natural curiosity and lack of preconceptions about human behavior made them ideal ambassadors for their own species. Melody had become particularly skilled at explaining human emotional expressions and motivations to her mother, often serving as a cultural interpreter when Sarah encountered human behaviors that didn't translate directly into dragon experience. Storm had developed a fascination with human engineering and had begun collaborating with the facility's technical staff on projects that incorporated both human ingenuity and dragon perspectives on natural systems. His insights had already led to improvements in the facility's environmental controls and energy efficiency. Ember had gravitated toward the artistic and creative aspects of human culture. She had learned to create surprisingly sophisticated drawings using modified styluses designed for her claws, and her artistic representations of dragon life were providing invaluable insights into dragon society and values. As the arrival date for the diplomatic mission approached, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The success or failure of these negotiations could determine whether humanity would gain powerful allies in their expansion across the galaxy, or whether first contact would be remembered as a missed opportunity. But watching Sarah interact with the research team, seeing her babies playing with human children who had arrived with some of the specialist families, Marcus felt confident that something unprecedented was being built on Kepler 442b. It wasn't just diplomatic relations or scientific cooperation. It was genuine friendship between species that had every reason to fear each other but had instead chosen trust. The night before the diplomatic mission's arrival, Sarah approached Marcus at their usual meeting place near the expanded facility. Through their now sophisticated communication system, she expressed something that Marcus translated as gratitude, but that carried emotional undertones he was still learning to understand. "I think she's trying to say thank you," Marcus told Dr. Tanaka, who was recording the exchange, "not just for the food and shelter, but for proving that her initial assessment of humanity was correct." Sarah's response, when translated, would later be inscribed as the founding motto of the Human-Dragon Alliance. "Your species sees not what creatures are, but what they might become together." The Dragon diplomatic mission arrived on a clear morning, when both of Kepler 442b's suns painted the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. 3 magnificent beings descended from the upper atmosphere, with a grace that made human spacecraft seem clumsy by comparison. Each dragon was larger than Sarah, their scales bearing the deep, rich coloration that apparently indicated advanced age and wisdom in dragon society. Marcus stood beside Commander Chen at the specially prepared landing area, his heart racing with anticipation and nervousness. Months of preparation had led to this moment, but nothing could have fully prepared him for the reality of meeting dragons who possessed centuries of knowledge and experience. Ambassador Aurelius, as Sarah had translated his name and title, was easily the largest dragon Marcus had ever seen. His scales held the deep bronze coloration of ancient metal, and his eyes carried an intelligence that seemed to weigh and measure everything around him with careful precision. The other two members of the diplomatic mission, Scholar Vermilion and Cultural Analyst Azure, were equally impressive, their bearing suggesting beings accustomed to dealing with complex interstellar politics. Sarah greeted the newcomers with elaborate vocalizations and formal postures that Marcus was only beginning to understand. The baby dragons, who had been nervously excited for days, positioned themselves precisely behind their mother in what was clearly a traditional presentation of family structure. The entire scene carried the weight of ceremony and ancient tradition. Ambassador Aurelius approached the human delegation with measured steps, his massive head held high in what Marcus had learned was a gesture of respectful attention. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through both air and ground, creating a communication experience that was as much felt as heard. "Greetings, humans of the Coalition," Marcus translated as Aurelius spoke, though he knew his interpretation captured only a fraction of the complex concepts being expressed. "I am Aurelius of the Third Spiral, speaker for the Dragon Conclave and keeper of the deep traditions. I come bearing the curiosity of my people and the hope of understanding." Commander Chen stepped forward, having practiced this moment extensively with Marcus and Sarah. "Welcome, Ambassador Aurelius. I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Galactic Coalition. On behalf of humanity and our allied species, we are honored by your presence and eager to learn from your wisdom." What followed was the most complex diplomatic exchange in human history. Dragons, Marcus discovered, approached negotiation not as a contest of wills or interests, but as a collaborative exploration of possibilities. They began not with demands or offers, but with stories, accounts of their own history, their mistakes and achievements, their understanding of the galaxy and their place within it. Aurelius spoke of the Dragon Conclave, a loose confederation of dragon communities spread across several star clusters. Unlike the hierarchical structures favored by most galactic civilizations, dragons organized themselves around principles of individual autonomy, balanced with collective wisdom. Each dragon was free to pursue their own interests and explorations, but major decisions affecting dragon society were made through consensus-building processes that could take decades to complete. "Your species puzzles us," Scholar Vermilion communicated through the increasingly sophisticated translation system that Melody helped operate. "Other races expand their territory through conquest or economic dominance. You seem to expand through friendship. This is not logical, yet it appears effective." Marcus found himself explaining humanity's approach to galactic relations, drawing on examples of successful human integrations with other species. "We've learned that willing allies are stronger than conquered subjects. When species choose to work with us rather than being forced to submit to us, the partnerships create benefits that neither side could achieve alone." Cultural Analyst Azure had spent the first day observing human behavior rather than participating in formal discussions. Her report to the other dragons was delivered in complex harmonics that conveyed not just information, but emotional and intuitive insights about human nature. "They form attachments rapidly and deeply," Marcus translated Azure's observations. "Their emotional responses appear chaotic, but follow predictable patterns based on principles they call ethics. They show genuine concern for the welfare of beings they have no logical reason to protect." The reference was clearly to humanity's treatment of Sarah and her babies, but Azure's analysis went deeper. She had observed the research team's interactions, the careful protocols designed to ensure dragon comfort and safety, the way human personnel had adapted their routines to accommodate dragon needs without being asked to do so. The turning point in the negotiations came when Ambassador Aurelius made an unexpected request. Rather than continuing formal discussions, he asked to observe humans engaged in their normal activities. He wanted to see how they behaved when they weren't trying to make diplomatic impressions. Marcus arranged for the dragon delegation to visit the mining operation during a regular shift change. The dragons observed human workers collaborating on complex technical problems, sharing meals, resolving conflicts through discussion rather than hierarchy, and showing care for injured colleagues. More importantly, they witnessed the easy friendship that had developed between the human workers and the baby dragons, who had become integrated into the daily life of the facility. Melody proudly demonstrated her collaboration with the human linguistic team, showing how she had learned to operate human-computer interfaces and had contributed to the development of the translation protocols. Storm presented his engineering projects, explaining through excited chirps and gestures how human and dragon approaches to problem-solving could complement each other. Ember displayed her artwork, which had evolved into stunning representations of cross-species cooperation and understanding. "This is unprecedented," Aurelius communicated to Marcus that evening. "In all our observations of galactic civilizations, we have never encountered a species that so readily accepts others as equals, rather than seeking to establish dominance relationships." The formal alliance negotiations took 3 more days, but Marcus sensed that the real decisions had been made during those informal observations. Dragons valued authenticity above all else, and they had seen genuine friendship rather than calculated diplomacy in humanity's treatment of Sarah's family. The final agreement was unlike any treaty in galactic history. Rather than establishing trade relationships or territorial agreements, the Human-Dragon Alliance was founded on principles of mutual exploration and shared learning. Dragons would share their advanced understanding of natural systems and long-range space travel. Humans would contribute their unique abilities in cross-species communication and adaptive problem-solving. More significantly, the alliance established the principle of voluntary integration, the idea that individuals from either species could choose to live and work among the other without surrendering their cultural identity or loyalty to their own people. Sarah and her babies would be the first to benefit from this arrangement, but Ambassador Aurelius indicated that other dragons were already expressing interest in human communities. As the diplomatic mission prepared to return to Dragon Space with news of the successful alliance, Marcus realized that his role as a simple beast handler had evolved into something far more significant. He had become humanity's bridge to a species that could teach them to see the galaxy, not as territory to be claimed, but as a community to be joined. The baby dragons, now officially recognized as the first dragon-human cultural exchange participants, would remain on Kepler 442b to continue their education in human society. In return, the first group of human volunteers would accompany the diplomatic mission back to Dragon Space for similar cultural immersion. Marcus volunteered to be among that first group, knowing that his unique relationship with Sarah's family made him an ideal candidate for deeper cultural exchange. As he prepared for a journey to Dragon Space, he reflected on how a simple call to remove a troublesome predator had led to one of humanity's greatest diplomatic achievements. The journey to Dragon Space aboard Ambassador Aurelius's vessel was unlike anything Marcus had experienced in decades of space travel. Dragon ships weren't constructed so much as grown, their living hull materials responding to the crew's intentions and environmental needs with an intelligence that bordered on telepathic. The vessel seemed to anticipate his needs, adjusting lighting and atmospheric conditions without any visible controls or interfaces. Marcus was part of a carefully selected group of 12 humans chosen for the first cultural exchange mission. The team included Dr. Tanaka for her xenobiological expertise, Engineer Rodriguez, who had proven adept at understanding dragon approaches to technology, and artist Sarah Kim, whose creative sensibilities had impressed Ember during her time on Kepler 442b. The 3-week journey provided an intensive introduction to dragon culture and philosophy. Ambassador Aurelius personally conducted what he called perspective-sharing sessions, where he attempted to convey dragon ways of understanding time, space, and consciousness that were fundamentally different from human concepts. "You think in moments," Aurelius explained during one of these sessions. "Past, present, future as separate chambers. Dragons experience time as a river, all moments accessible simultaneously. This allows us to make decisions based on consequences that won't manifest for centuries." Marcus found this temporal perspective both fascinating and challenging. Dragons planned not just for their own lifetimes, but for the development of their species across millennia. Their approach to exploration and discovery was patient in ways that human urgency could barely comprehend. The dragon homeworld, when they finally arrived, defied every expectation Marcus had formed during the journey. Instead of a single planet, dragon civilization had developed across a complex system of interconnected asteroids, each one carefully modified to support different aspects of dragon society. Some asteroids were dedicated to pure research, others to artistic endeavors, still others to the deep contemplation that dragons called inner flying. Aurelius guided the human delegation to what he described as the consensus spire, a massive crystalline structure that served as the closest thing dragon society had to a government building. But as Marcus quickly learned, dragon decision-making bore no resemblance to human political processes. The conclave chamber was a vast spherical space where hundreds of dragons floated in complex three-dimensional formations, their conversations creating harmonic patterns that somehow conveyed not just individual opinions, but collective emotional states. Marcus watched in amazement as decisions emerged organically from these group dynamics, without voting or formal procedures. Elder Sapphire, a dragon whose age was measured in millennia rather than centuries, served as the primary host for the human delegation. Her scales had achieved a translucent quality that seemed to contain entire galaxies of stars, and her voice carried harmonics that Marcus felt in his bones rather than heard with his ears. "Welcome to the deep discussions, young mammals," she communicated with what Marcus was learning to recognize as gentle humor. "You arrive at an interesting moment in our considerations of the galaxy's future." The interesting moment turned out to be a debate that had been ongoing for several dragon generations about whether advanced civilizations had a responsibility to guide younger species or to allow them to develop independently. The arrival of the Human Alliance proposal had become a central case study in this philosophical discussion. Marcus found himself invited to present humanity's perspective to the assembled dragons, a responsibility that terrified him until he realized that dragons valued authentic experience over polished rhetoric. He told them about his work with dangerous beasts, about the moment he first saw Sarah protecting her babies, about the choice to offer food rather than force. "You saw hunger and responded with feeding," Elder Sapphire observed. "You saw fear and responded with patience. You saw intelligence and responded with respect. These are not the behaviors we have observed in most species when they encounter the unknown." Dr. Tanaka presented her scientific findings about dragon intelligence and capabilities, while Engineer Rodriguez demonstrated human adaptive technologies that could be enhanced by dragon perspectives on biological systems. Artist Kim shared her collaborative works with Ember, showing how cross-species creative partnership could produce art neither species could achieve alone. But the most powerful presentation came from an unexpected source. During the third day of discussions, the conclave received a real-time communication from Melody, Storm, and Ember on Kepler 442b. The young dragons had learned to use human communication technology to participate in the debate about their own future. Through their enthusiastic reports about life among humans, the baby dragons conveyed something that all the formal presentations couldn't capture: the simple joy of friendship across species boundaries. Their excitement about human customs, their pride in their collaborative achievements, their obvious affection for their human friends created an emotional resonance that swept through the assembled dragons. Marcus watched in fascination as the harmonic patterns in the conclave chamber shifted, indicating a consensus emerging from the collective consciousness. The dragons weren't just evaluating humanity as potential allies. They were recognizing in humans a reflection of their own values of curiosity, patience, and emotional wisdom. The formal approval of the alliance was expressed not through speeches or documents, but through a ceremony that Marcus could only describe as a symphony of shared consciousness. Hundreds of dragons sang together in harmonics that created physical vibrations throughout the asteroid, their combined voices expressing concepts too complex for translation, but somehow comprehensible at an emotional level. Elder Sapphire approached Marcus personally after the ceremony concluded. "Your species has given us a gift we didn't know we needed," she communicated. "You have shown us that wisdom can develop quickly when it grows from compassion rather than calculation. The remainder of the cultural exchange focused on practical cooperation. Dragons shared their mastery of biological technologies, ships that healed themselves, tools that adapted to user needs, food systems that created perfect nutrition from basic elements. Humans contributed their insights into rapid adaptation and creative problem-solving under pressure. Marcus spent most of his time working with dragon explorer teams who were planning expeditions to previously unexplored regions of the galaxy. His experience with dangerous and unpredictable creatures made him valuable for missions where first contact with unknown species was likely. Have developed instincts for recognizing intelligence in forms that don't match your own patterns, explained Captain Stellar, a dragon whose scales shifted color with her emotional states. This ability could prevent misunderstandings that have historically led to conflicts between species. The most significant development came when Elder Sapphire announced that several young dragons had volunteered to establish permanent residences in human space, while selected humans would be invited to join dragon exploration missions as cultural liaison specialists. The exchange program would create the first truly integrated interspecies community in galactic history. As his time in dragon space drew to a close, Marcus realized that his role as a beast handler had prepared him perfectly for this new phase of human expansion across the galaxy. The same instincts that allowed him to understand and communicate with dangerous creatures now enabled him to bridge the gap between vastly different forms of intelligence. The return journey to Kepler 442b carried more than just the human cultural exchange team. 3 young dragons, including Captain Stellar's daughter Nebula, accompanied them to begin their own exploration of human society. The ship also carried technological gifts and cultural artifacts that would transform human understanding of what was possible when species chose cooperation over competition. Marcus looked forward to reuniting with Sarah and her babies, who had become not just the subjects of his greatest professional achievement, but among his closest friends. The simple beast handler who had responded to a mining camp's call for help had become humanity's first dragon cultural ambassador. But more importantly, he had helped prove that the galaxy held room for friendship across any boundary. 2 years after first contact, Kepler 442b had been transformed from a remote mining outpost into the thriving capital of the Human-Dragon Alliance. The original facility had expanded into a magnificent city that seamlessly blended human architecture with dragon design principles, creating structures that seemed to grow organically from the mountain landscape while providing optimal functionality for both species. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Alliance headquarters, watching as human children played alongside young dragons in the communal gardens below. The sight never failed to amaze him. Beings from different star systems who had found common ground in curiosity, friendship, and shared exploration of the galaxy's wonders. Melody, now approaching dragon adolescence, had become the Alliance's chief cultural translator, her unique upbringing among humans making her invaluable for bridging communication gaps that still occasionally arose between the species. Storm had established the Alliance's first integrated engineering core, where human adaptability combined with dragon biological mastery to create technologies that neither species could have developed alone. Ember had founded an artistic movement called Consciousness Synthesis, creating works that expressed the emotional and intellectual experience of interspecies friendship. Sarah had accepted the position of dragon representative to the Galactic Coalition, using her deep understanding of human nature to help other species recognize the potential benefits of human partnership. Her reports to the Coalition had been instrumental in encouraging other civilizations to consider humans as diplomatic equals, rather than dangerous newcomers. The success on Kepler 442b had attracted attention throughout the galaxy. Representatives from a dozen species had established permanent missions at the Alliance capital, eager to study and potentially emulate the human-dragon cooperation model. The Zephyrians had been particularly impressed by the emotional intelligence aspects of the Alliance, while the Crystalline Collective had expressed fascination with the creative technologies emerging from integrated research. Teams Marcus's role had evolved again as his expertise in cross-species communication made him essential for expanding Alliance operations. He now led the first contact protocol development team, creating guidelines for approaching newly discovered intelligent species based on the principles that had made the Dragon Alliance successful. The morning brought news that would test everything they had built together. Long-range sensors had detected an approaching fleet of unknown vessels, their technology suggesting a civilization more advanced than anything previously encountered in local galactic space. The ships were clearly heading for Kepler 442b, but their intentions remained completely unknown. Commander Chen, now promoted to Alliance Military Coordinator, briefed the emergency response team on what little intelligence they had gathered. The fleet consists of 12 vessels, each larger than anything in our current database. They're not responding to our communication attempts, but they're not jamming our signals either. They're just silent. Ambassador Aurelius, who maintained a permanent residence at the Alliance capital, approached the situation with characteristic dragon patience. Silence is not necessarily hostility, he reminded the assembled team. Many advanced species prefer to observe before announcing their presence. We should prepare for contact but not assume aggressive intent. Marcus found himself thinking about that first morning, when he had answered the mining camp's call for help. The principles that had guided him then seemed equally relevant now. Approach with caution but not fear. Offer friendship but be prepared to defend if necessary. And always remember that intelligence could take forms that defied expectation. The Alliance decision-making process had evolved to incorporate both human urgency and dragon patience, creating a system that could respond quickly to immediate needs while maintaining consideration for long-term consequences. Within hours, they had developed a contact protocol that would demonstrate their peaceful intentions while protecting Alliance populations if the newcomers proved hostile. Melody volunteered to serve as primary communicator for first contact, her unique background making her ideal for attempting to establish communication with beings whose thought processes might be radically different from both human and dragon norms. The Alliance's integrated communication systems, developed through years of human-dragon collaboration, could theoretically adapt to almost any form of intelligent expression. As the fleet approached the outer system, more details became available. The ships appeared to be biological rather than mechanical, suggesting a species that had evolved technology along entirely different lines from any known civilization. More intriguingly, passive scans indicated that each vessel carried not just one species, but multiple different forms of life working in apparent harmony. They're like us, Dr. Tanaka observed during the final briefing before contact. A multi-species alliance rather than a single civilization. That suggests they understand the value of cooperation across biological boundaries. The contact attempt was scheduled for the same natural amphitheater where Marcus had first demonstrated Sarah's intelligence to the Coalition survey team. The symbolism was intentional. The Alliance wanted to show these newcomers that they had experience building bridges between radically different forms of life. Marcus stood beside Melody as the lead vessel descended toward the designated meeting ground. The ship's organic curves and shifting coloration reminded him of dragon vessels, but with subtle differences that suggested an even deeper integration between technology and biology. As it landed, sections of the hull simply parted like opening flowers to reveal the beings inside. What emerged challenged every assumption about how advanced civilizations should develop. The delegation consisted of 4 distinct species, each clearly adapted for different environments and functions, yet moving with a coordination that spoke of centuries of cooperative evolution. One species appeared crystalline and geometric. Another was composed of flowing energy patterns barely contained within translucent membranes. A third resembled enormous flowering plants with mobility. And the fourth defied easy description, beings of pure thought given semi-physical form through technological integration. The crystal being stepped forward first, its faceted surface reflecting the twin suns in spectacular patterns as it began generating sounds that somehow conveyed meaning, despite bearing no resemblance to any known form of communication. Melody listened intently, her dragon translation abilities working to find patterns and intentions within the alien expression. They call themselves the Synthesis, she translated haltingly. They're explorers like the dragons, but instead of individual species expanding separately, they evolved as an integrated collective from the beginning. They've been observing the Alliance for months, trying to understand how 2 independent species achieved voluntary cooperation. Marcus felt a familiar thrill of recognition. These beings represented the next evolution of what he and Sarah had started, not just friendship between species, but the possibility of true integration while maintaining individual identity and autonomy. The plant being communicated next. Its message conveyed through complex arrangements of bioluminescent patterns. The energy being contributed harmonic resonances that added emotional context to the communication, while the thought being projected concepts directly into the minds of the Alliance delegation. Together, their message was clear. The synthesis had come not as conquerors or even as traditional diplomats, but as students hoping to learn from the Alliance's unprecedented achievement in voluntary interspecies cooperation. We have achieved integration through necessity. The combined delegation communicated through melodies, increasingly sophisticated translation abilities. Our species evolved together on the same worlds, making cooperation essential for survival. But you have chosen cooperation across the barriers of separate evolution, separate worlds, separate histories. This suggests possibilities we never considered. What followed was not a negotiation but a sharing of experiences, insights, and dreams. The Alliance representatives described their journey from first contact to integrated civilization, while the synthesis shared their own history of species that had learned to function as a single organism while maintaining individual consciousness. Marcus realized that his simple decision to offer food to a desperate dragon mother had initiated something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The Alliance had become proof that the galaxy's future lay not in the dominance of single species, but in the infinite possibilities created when different forms of intelligence chose to work together. As the formal discussions continued, Marcus watched human children, young dragons, and now the first synthesis observers playing together in the gardens below. Each species brought unique gifts to the group: human adaptability, dragon wisdom, synthesis integration techniques, creating a community that was stronger and more creative than any of its components could be alone. The beast handler, who had once worked alone with dangerous creatures, had helped create a template for galactic civilization, based on the revolutionary idea that differences should be celebrated rather than feared, that diversity was strength rather than weakness, and that the greatest discoveries came not from conquest but from friendship. The unthinkable had been achieved, and it was only the beginning.